Unfortunately, I was going through many struggles. I got into I was lonely, looking for friends, peers. I got into Satanism, and I always had struggles with depressions and things, so I was very open and vulnerable. And in the story that my mother gave in 1978, this is my birth mother. I know it gets a little confusing. It shows something that I never saw in myself before, and that was how I was breaking down mentally. This was at the time now of the crimes. This is when the crimes had started and things were going on. I believe that I was not only oppressed by the devil, so to speak, but also had very serious, mental health issues. And because, now this is going back in 1977, 76, 77. This is just from the article, I'll just read a little bit. Shortly after they became acquainted, that's me and my sister and mother, my birth family, I found my birth family, Nat Berkowitz called Rosalind. Rosalind was my half-sister, a very beautiful, loving woman. And he said, the article said he felt strongly that David needed psychiatric help. He had seen David standing in front of a mirror, pounding his head with his hands. He begged Rosalind to see if she could get her brother to go for help. You're talking about me. Rosalind tried, but was unable to convince David to get therapy. So she offered to go with him, if that would make it easier. But his response was always the same: I tried it, and they can't help me. I don't like talking to them. Soon after that, Nat Berkowitz called her again with an even more urgent problem. He was upset because David had just called and told him that he was going to the doctor, that he was going to die. There was something wrong with his head. So here's my adoptive father, in desperation, reaching out to my half-sister, whom he never met. They just spoke over the phone. He reached out to her because he was so alarmed at my behavior. And this is going back, 40 years. When I was about 20, by this time 23 years old. And the article went on to say, Rosalind was stunned. She had heard nothing about this from Richard. That's me. They called me Richard. She called Richard immediately and asked, "What is this about your head?" Richard, that's me. Yeah, I probably have a tumor or something. I don't have too long to live. I'm going to go to the doctor. Rosalind asked if there was any way she could help. No, he assured her, that's me, and there was no further discussion. See, my birth family called me Richard because they knew me as Richard David Falco, but my adoptive family called me David. And, so that's why it's a little confusing, the changing of the names. And then it goes on to say, then there was the phone conversation Rosalind had with Richard when he really seemed out of it. My sister was saying, I seem so out of it. He was sort of giggling. I asked him what was the matter. He said, oh, nothing. They're out to get me, but they're not going to get me. I said, who is out to get you? He said, people, just people. I think my phone is bugged. I even think they bugged my car. They're out to get me. They're going to get me. Again, I asked who, what makes you say this? Just people, just people. And he said, that's me talking, that I have to go now. Rosalind assumed that I was just high on something. And then the article goes on and on, but it shows me, but something that I couldn't even see myself, how irrational I had become, how really schizophrenic and depressive, and really my life was spiraling out of control, mentally, spiritually. I believe, and the reasons for this, I was under increasing degrees of demonic control, because at the time I was reading the Satanic Bible. I went to a park near where I lived in Yonkers. I went against wisdom to move to Yonkers in the first place, to be near this park called Untermeyer Park, where I had some friends there that were into ritual occultic stuff. The park, it's a long story, but that park was dedicated to occult things. The owner of the park was once a member of the Golden Dawn. He was the man who once owned the park before it became a city park, and it was his personal property. It was a huge, beautiful place with all kinds of statues and all kinds of things, dedicated to occultic stuff. Untermeyer Park was owned by Samuel Untermeyer, who was also rubbed shoulders with Aleister Crowley. Well, Aleister Crowley was one of the most evil men who ever lived, the father of Satanism, and all on and on. Well, anyway, to make a long story short, my life was really coming apart. My personality was disintegrating. I began to be controlled by other entities that I opened myself up for. But I had a propensity for that all my life because of the experiences I had in childhood, the trauma and everything. It did open up the door to demonic strongholds being set up in my life. And so anyway, the crimes happened. There was a tragedy. I was arrested. And I was so glad to finally be arrested because I was in such a state of torment. My life was truly a mess. I was able to work and function outwardly, but inwardly, I was just in turmoil. And I was not, I believe, in my right mind. When I was arrested, the police asked me, "Oh, you're son of Sam?" I said, "Well, yes." And I was very respectful to them. Interestingly, how the story changes over time, and you see all these embellishments that come in. One of the things that keep getting said over and over again is whenever this thing is repeated, which is a lot, often, when I was first arrested, the police asked me, "Are you son of Sam?" And I said, "Yes." And I was, very cooperative and respectful to them, but I never said, "So what took you so long?" And over again, you read articles and all these professors and all these people always say the same. "Oh, Berkowitz said, well, so what took you so long?" As if I were teasing them. But if I had done that, they would have beat me up pretty good because I would have been just, you can't mouth off to an officer like a wise guy, and they would have slapped me around. The fact that everything went so peacefully showed that I never said that. In fact, I asked a friend, again, Maury Terry, a journalist who had been following the case from the very beginning. I said, "Maury, could you please check to see from early reports that are in the papers or in the media if I actually said, 'So what took you so long?'" He checked and got back to me a few weeks later and says, "No, that's not recorded anywhere." That's just an embellishment that happened. And it may sound like a minor thing, like, so what's the big deal of that one sentence? But it changes the whole picture. It made me look like some kind of smart aleck or something like that. Another misconception that has come is the so-called Mona Lisa smile, because there were pictures of me taken by the media, and I had like a smirk on my face. So why does he have the smirk? And the reason was because I was embarrassed and I was afraid. I mean, I was arrested, and it was a nightmare. Getting fingerprinted, getting booked, going to police headquarters where I was grilled by detectives for hours and hours. It seemed like the whole day. When they took me out of the precinct in Brooklyn and they brought me before the public, they did this thing called the perp walk, where they walk you through the streets. They purposely walked you around the block so everybody could look at your face. That's still being done today. And there's a lot of issues with that. But nevertheless, they took me on the so-called perp walk. But the detectives, by this time, there was nothing but hysteria in the city. It was a time of bedlam. And the detectives told me, "Listen, we got to walk you around. We're going to take you into another van to take you to police headquarters." I was in Brooklyn at the time. So they said, "Listen, the place is mobbed with people. You stay with us. We think someone's going to try to maybe shoot you or something like that. If we push you to the ground, don't resist, just fall to the ground." Now I'm terrified because I don't know what's happening. I've never experienced anything like this before. I've already been up for hours without sleep, without anything to eat. So they take me out of the building and into this mob of nothing but flashbulbs. I'd never seen so many people, mostly media people, crowding around. It seemed like by the hundreds, if I remember correctly. My mind was in a fog, but I still remember. And they were marching me around the block, and I felt they was just snapping pictures like crazy and yelling at me, and people were screaming in the background. Reporters, 20 at a time, were asking me questions. And I'm like, I felt so embarrassed. And plus, I was so scared that one of the things, especially men do when they're embarrassed by something, they kind of like smile, like, you do something dumb, and some people would react, "Oh man, I'm so sorry." Other times would be like, "Oh man, I messed up." So it was just a natural reaction to have like a smirk on my face. But it wasn't, but the media and, you know, other people took that the wrong way. To this very day, because they made it look like I'm laughing at people, but I wasn't. I was really just so overwhelmed with everything that happened, so embarrassed, so confused, and I was afraid that you know, I just, when you're afraid, sometimes you smile, so okay, you know, whatever, and that picture has stuck with me all these years. But it was just another misconception. Not that it means anything, but it just shows you how easy it is to look at something and get the wrong impression. And all these talking head experts to this very day comment on this, saying, oh, this, oh, that. And you know what? It was really about nothing. But it just, that's the way it ended, you know. So anyway, you know, here I am today, all these years later, 10 years into my prison sentence, giving my life to Jesus Christ. And my life has never been the same since. The Lord, God has been with me. I grew up in the Bronx. It was a great place to grow up, even though I had a lot of childhood depression and traumas and bad experiences in school. I was a rough kid in the neighborhood, always fighting, but I had friends. I did good. I managed. I had a loving family. My adoptive parents always stuck with me, and you know, I survived. I think the Bronx was the greatest place to live because from my window I could see for miles. I lived on the 6th floor, and I could see for miles. And sometimes I could stick my head out the window and look down the street on Stratford Avenue where I lived, and I could see across the Long Island Sound, which is a big body of water separating the Bronx from Queens. And at night, I used to be able to see the lights from Shea Stadium where the New York Mets played. The lights would, when they had a home game, the lights would go up into the sky. And I remember always looking at that. I was like a real baseball fan growing up with the Yankees and the Mets and things like that. I had, like, in many ways, a normal childhood. So I have a lot of good memories. I rode my bike everywhere for miles and miles. My bike helped me to keep my sanity and work off all that, the hyperactive. I'll be pedaling my bike from morning till night. So my life had its ups and downs, bittersweet adventures and things like that, and tragedy too, you know.